welcome Paul Howard to IT Tala.
Thank you, it's nice to be here.
And thank you for participating on our Culture Exchange programme. I think it's great of you to take time out to come and see us.
Yeah.
Now Paul, you're most known for Ross O'Carroll Kelly,
yes,
the character, and a series of books obviously in the newspaper column. But first I just wanted to ask how you got into writing.
Well, I left school after the Leaving Cert with just this desire to be a journalist. I mean, I never really wanted to write novels for a living, but I wanted to be a sports journalist, and I didn't really have any idea. Once I failed to get into a journalism course when I left school, I didn't get a good enough Leaving Cert. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I took a job in a postcard factory, and I was writing captions, 50-word captions for the backs of postcards, just as a kind of, I suppose, as a way of just earning money from writing while, you know,
looking at options.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I did that for about a year, and I suppose at night then I started freelancing for various local newspapers, just covering council meetings. Eamon Gilmore was a local councillor at the time. He wasn't even a TD, so he would have been one of my contacts. So I kind of had a few contacts who used to give me stories, and yeah, I started freelancing for local papers, and then eventually I joined Southside, which was the main free sheet in the area where I grew up, and they were owned by the Sunday Tribune. So I suppose it was kind of a, you know, it is, it was kind of climbing the ladder that way, you know, getting a good story that, you know, people noticed, and then I was offered work in the Sunday Tribune, then covering a snooker tournament, and then I became a full-time sports journalist, which to me was where it was supposed to end. That was the plan for me. I never wanted to do anything beyond being a sports journalist. Actually, I never wanted to do anything beyond being a sports journalist for the Sunday Tribune. From the time I was 11, that was the newspaper I wanted to write for, and that was the job I wanted.
So you reached the pinnacle.
I did. I mean, quite early as well. I mean, I suppose I would have been in my kind of late 20s, 27 or 28, when I was the chief sports writer for the Sunday Tribune, but this thing, you know, writing Ross O'Carroll Kelly was a diversion. I mean, I did. I mean, it wasn't part of my life plan. I never wanted to be. I never wanted to be a novelist. I see myself described as a novelist, and I wince a little bit because it was never. It was never for me.
But he's been wonderful for you. But where did he come from?
I started this when I was writing about sport at the beginning. One of the things they do when you're cutting your teeth, I suppose, as a sports writer, is newspapers send you to these schools rugby matches, and you know, it's better than, obviously it's better than sending you to an Ireland rugby match to learn your trade. So they send you to sort of smaller games, but I was completely blown away by what I saw at these schools matches. We had a soccer team. I'm from a soccer playing background, and so we had our school soccer team. When they played, there were maybe 30 or 40 people stayed behind after school to see them. So I'm suddenly going to these schools rugby matches, and there's 3,000 and 4,000 people at them, and that just blew me away.
It was amazing. Subculture almost.
And I think I spent more time looking at what was happening off the pitch than what was happening on. And what I mean by that is the sort of you know, the little subculture that surrounds schools rugby. There was the yummy mummies, as I call them, you know, the mothers, with the cars that should be driving up the north face of the Eiger, you know, and they're there, and they're dressed in beautiful finery, and they're wearing baby seals. 6 or 7 baby seals have gone into making this coat for the day. And then the kind of groupies, which were the mostly Mount Anvil girls who would throw themselves at these horrifically ugly looking rugby players, you know. And
but heroic to them.
But heroic. You know, I mean, they were heroes to their among their peers, which was really interesting. And I was leaving a match, and I remember it really clearly. It was Blackrock, and I heard this kid who'd just come off the pitch say to his dad, "I don't give a fuck how you think I played. Just crack open the wallet, dude." And I thought,
hoping you do the accent. Okay.
I hear that accent all the time in my head, you know, especially when I'm working on a Ross book, which I am at the moment, I'm thinking in that voice, for 8 to 10 hours a day, so it's difficult to get it out sometimes. But that, I mean, that relationship between the father and the son, that dynamic, it really became the prototype for the Ross, Charles O'Carroll Kelly dynamic. And he really, I mean, I don't know who he is now. I didn't know who he was at the time, but he really was the first model, for Ross. So it started off as a column, and the column started in 1998, so that's 16 years ago now, and then it you know, it kind of span into a book, which the first 2 books I published myself, and then it became something else, and gathered up momentum, and until eventually I took a 2-year sabbatical from sports writing 8 years ago, to write Ross O'Carroll Kelly, and I never went back. And the newspaper I wrote for, the Sunday Tribune, no longer exists.
Yes, of course.
It's so it's.
Do you miss it at all, the sports?
I do. I mean, there was never a day when I didn't miss it. There are some aspects of it that I don't miss. I mean, I think when I started writing about sport in the beginning, it was sports people were quite accessible. It was easy to get an interview with. You could phone I mean, there was no mobile phones at the time, but you could phone the captain of the Ireland rugby team or the Ireland soccer team at home and say, can I do an interview with you next week? A week later you're sitting in his kitchen and you're talking to him for 4 hours, and then he drives you to the airport afterwards. But it's all, I mean, it's changed now utterly. Like, you know, it's all roped off, everything is controlled. If you request an interview with the captain of the Ireland rugby or soccer team, you're going to do it in an environment where there's a PR person present telling you after 5 minutes to wrap it up, and you know, so that aspect of it, it became very stage managed at the end. So it was kind of
spontaneity.
I mean, that was really it. It was the spontaneity, and everybody I think was a lot more guarded about what they said. They were a lot more media savvy, I suppose. Whereas when I started off first, you could kind of
expect the unexpected maybe as well.
And you were always surprised as well by an interview. That's the thing. And I think towards the end of my time as a sports journalist, I ceased to be surprised by anything that was said during an interview.
And what about Ross? How is Ross to you now? How is he faring? Are you still, looking forward to the next novel, to the next project with Ross?
I do. I mean, I suppose I got to a point about maybe 5 years ago where I was thinking, right, this is it, and I kind of felt it was coming towards its end. But then I suppose the economic downturn happened, and it just changed everything. You know, suddenly I was writing. I mean, the last 3 or 4 Ross books I've written, they've really been sort of comeuppance books. So they deal with Ross in this new social environment. You know, so he's dealing with this changing topography, you know, so old clubs and pubs and restaurants that he used to go to now have shutters down, and I suppose a lot of the old certainties of his life, they've ebbed away now.
And indeed his circle of friends.
And his friends. And so I've been writing a lot about, you know, his friends being made redundant. He had a friend who worked who was an estate agent. He worked for a company called Hook, Line and Sinker. And he, you know, his estate agency closed down, and so that's really what I've been writing about. So I suppose it's a much more, I think personally, it's a much more interesting time to write about a character like Ross than it was during the years of plenty, during the years of the Celtic Tiger. But I didn't, to be honest, I thought when I was writing those Celtic Tiger novels, I thought I might be writing the kind of comeuppance of Ross in 30 or 40 years' time. I didn't think it was all going to unravel so quickly.
As none of us expected. So in 2007, suddenly you had all this new material, perhaps.
And it was in the course of 6 months. It went from, you know, like I suppose Anglo-Irish banks' problems became apparent, you know, in the autumn of 2008, and by Christmas of 2008, you could see it. You know, you could actually see the sort of impact of this sort of implosion of the Irish economy. You could see it on the streets, you could see it in shuttered shops.
And it had to be captured. And I think what's wonderful about the Ross series is that you've captured it through a comic vein, you know, that's accessible to the masses.
You know. I try to anyway.
You know. I think that's
it is difficult. I mean, I suppose with the recession, I have to be a lot more careful about the comedy. Whereas when I was writing about people getting hot tubs, for instance, installed in the garden of a terraced house in Fox Rock, it was different. Everybody can laugh at that. Whereas I think now I just have to be a lot more careful about my targets, because, you know, I would hate to think that, you know, people thought I was laughing at anyone's situation. And that's
regardless
so that's always,
of their class, regardless of
and it is, because it's a completely, this recession, I lived through a recession in the 1980s, and it was a recession that affected, I think, mostly working class people. It affected manufacturing a lot, and this recession, I think, is a lot more worldwide. It's a lot more sort of socially democratic. And especially in this country, we had a whole middle class of people who were earning a living from, you know, in as solicitors, as estate agents, as architects, as quantity surveyors. And they're the people who are the new unemployed.
That's right.
You know?
Yes,
and,
yes.
But I mean, I am always conscious of it. Like I probably think a lot harder about about, you know, what are the targets now.
And I think Ross, in a sense, as a character, he seems, we kind of have a bit more sympathy for him. He seems a little bit maybe more sympathetic, a little bit more empathetic, I thought, in the most recent book, Downturn Abbey. I could be wrong, but
no, I think you're right. I think I've probably warmed to him quite a bit over the years, and it didn't. I never saw that coming. Like I never. When I wrote the first books, when I look back on them now, the humour is quite sledgehammer in them. You know, it's.
He's obnoxious.
Yeah, he's horribly obnoxious, and it's a bit more. I think it's a bit more deliberate. You can kind of see what I'm doing. I certainly can when I'm looking back, thinking, I know what I was thinking when I wrote that thing. And this is, I mean, I suppose I, kind of growing up, I came from a working class background. Probably had a chip on my shoulder about issues of class and things like that, and that's where a lot of the Ross material comes from. I suppose, you know, for me, looking at things that were happening during the Celtic Tiger, because I remember a time when money was so tight, when credit didn't exist in our lives, I found them probably more absurd than a lot of people
who were younger or living through it.
Who would have come to it fresh. So, but I can kind of see the rage in me during those early books, and a strange thing happened. I think as I went on, I kind of grew to kind of understand the character a bit more and to have a bit more affection for him, as other people did.
And
as
Ross,
well.
of course, was growing up.
And he became a father.
Children. Exactly.
And that's it. That was the
working on a relationship with Sorka.
And that's it. And I suppose I saw that he was like anyone. He has the same issues. He might come from a privileged background, but he has the same issues as anybody else. You know, which is friendships, his relationship with his girlfriend who became his wife, fatherhood, and he's actually quite a good father. And I think it's probably, apart from kicking points for Castlerack College in the Leinster School Senior Cup, it's the only thing he's actually been successful at. He's a useless husband. He's a useless son. He's useless academically. He's never really worked or made a success of any of the jobs he's done. But his instincts, I think, are quite good.
His relationship with Ronan, I think the son character was an eye-opener when he met him first.
And I think it softened people's hatred for Ross. It sort of wore the hard edges off their
Now, of course, in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to see Ross set in 2022 in Breaking Dad in the Gaiety. So I wish you all the best with that, Paul. I think it's going to be a great success. And thank you again for coming in and giving us a brief insight
Thanks for having me
into Ross. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.